Sarah, a dedicated architect with an unwavering belief in stability and trust, had always envisioned a life built on solid foundations, much like the structures she meticulously designed. Her world revolved around Mark, a charismatic marketing executive whose initial devotion had swept her off her feet. Their life together was a tapestry woven with shared dreams, a beautiful home echoing with laughter, and an emotional connection that felt unbreakable. He was her anchor, she, his muse. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect existence, subtle fissures were beginning to appear, almost imperceptible at first. Mark, driven by an unspoken struggle with self-worth, began to lose himself in his demanding career. Overwork spiraled into increasing distance, and unexplained absences became more frequent, each one a tiny tremor threatening the bedrock of their relationship. A chilling unease started to settle over Sarah. It began as a whisper of intuition, a gut feeling she couldn't shake. Unanswered calls stretched into long, silent hours, and Mark's explanations for his late nights grew increasingly vague, riddled with inconsistencies that pricked at her once unshakable faith. The discovery, when it finally came, wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, agonizing unraveling. A cryptic message flashed across his forgotten phone screen, quickly followed by a hidden receipt for a dinner she hadn't attended. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity, forming a picture she desperately wished wasn't real. Confrontation was inevitable, a raw, painful showdown that left them both exposed. Mark, stripped of his usual charm, confessed, his voice thick with a mixture of shame and desperation, pleading for understanding even as he admitted his betrayal. Sarah's world imploded. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to a profound, gut-wrenching pain that stole her breath. The very ground beneath her feet seemed to vanish. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of accusations, tears and blame, the raw wound of infidelity laid bare. Mark, consumed by remorse, launched into a desperate campaign to reconcile, his apologies fervent, his promises of change endless. He swore he would do anything to win her back. Sarah, caught in a brutal internal conflict, found her deep love battling fiercely with the searing pain of betrayal. The urge to forgive wrestled with the profound hurt that threatened to consume her. Their shared history, the years of unwavering companionship, ultimately swayed her. A fragile agreement was reached. They would try. They would attempt to mend what seemed irrevocably broken, driven by the lingering embers of their once bright love. For a brief, deceptive period, a honeymoon phase of reconciliation enveloped them, offering a temporary peace, a forced optimism. But the seeds of doubt had been sown, and the trauma lingered like a shadow. Sarah found herself in a constant state of hypervigilance. Every late text, every distant look, every unexplained moment transformed into a trigger, reigniting the fear and suspicion that gnawed at her. Mark, in turn, began to chafe under the constant scrutiny, the heavy burden of his past actions making him feel perpetually judged. Soon, the first cracks reappeared. Small arguments escalated into bitter exchanges, and unspoken resentments festered beneath the surface of their fragile truce. Then one quiet afternoon, while tidying their bedroom, Sarah's fingers brushed against an old, forgotten item tucked away in a drawer. A faded concert ticket from a band Mark had once claimed to despise. A flood of painful memories washed over her, making her question if true healing, after such a profound betrayal, was even possible. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The faded concert ticket, a seemingly innocuous piece of paper, became a symbol of Sarah's eroding trust. Each day presented a new challenge, a fresh battle against the insidious doubt that gnawed at her. Rebuilding trust, she discovered, was an infinitely harder task than she had ever imagined. Every interaction with Mark, Every shared glance, every touch, felt tainted by the shadow of his infidelity. Her emotions were a relentless roller coaster, soaring with moments of fragile hope, only to plummet into crushing despair and anger, often within the span of a single conversation. She yearned for the simple, unburdened love they once shared, but it seemed perpetually out of reach. Mark, too, found himself caught in a tormenting cycle. His genuine remorse warred with a growing frustration, his patience wearing thin under Sarah's persistent scrutiny. He tried to be understanding, to absorb her pain, but her constant questioning and lingering suspicion chipped away at his resolve, making him defensive. The genuine intimacy they once shared had vanished, replaced by a palpable distance, both physical and emotional, that grew wider with each passing day, despite their strained efforts to bridge it. Their beautiful home, once a sanctuary of shared dreams, now felt like a stage for a play they were both performing, each word and gesture weighed for hidden meanings. External pressures began to mount, adding layers of stress to their already delicate situation. Friends and family, well-meaning or not, offered their opinions. Some supportive, some overtly judgmental. Each pronouncement a stone added to their heavy burden. Seeking professional help, they began therapy sessions, a neutral ground that was often anything but comfortable. In the sterile yet emotionally charged environment of the therapist's office, uncomfortable revelations began to surface. Mark, prodded by probing questions, slowly unveiled deeper motivations behind his betrayal. A past trauma he had never fully processed, a gnawing feeling of inadequacy that had driven him to seek validation elsewhere, a desperate attempt to fill a void within himself. Sarah listened, her heart a tangled knot of comprehension and renewed pain, struggling to reconcile this vulnerable man with the one who had shattered her world. During these sessions, Sarah also confronted her own struggle with identity. She felt defined by the betrayal, as if her entire being had been reduced to the role of the wronged partner, losing herself in the overwhelming pain and the relentless effort to heal. The infidelity became the weapon in every dispute, a poisoned arrow always ready to be unleashed. Old arguments, seemingly resolved, resurfaced with renewed venom, each one circling back to the original wound. Sarah found herself unable to fully forgive. The image of Mark's betrayal replaying in her mind like a malevolent film, constantly undermining any progress they made. Every fleeting moment of peace was shattered by a memory, a suspicion, a fresh wave of hurt. Mark, in turn, began to feel perpetually punished, his genuine remorse slowly morphing into a simmering resentment for what he perceived as Sarah's inability to move past it, her relentless tracking of his every move. He felt trapped, his efforts seemingly futile. The brutal truth dawned on them both. Forgiveness wasn't a single, decisive act, but a continuous, often agonizing process, and they were both faltering under its immense weight. Then, during a particularly heated argument fueled by exhaustion and despair, Mark lashed out, his voice laced with a bitter edge. "What more do you want from me, Sarah? I've told you everything," he exclaimed, his face contorted. "Everything," Sarah retorted, her voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. "You haven't even told me her name." And then, in a moment of reckless desperation, Mark revealed a crucial detail about the affair that he had previously withheld, a name, a place, a fragment of truth that completely blindsided Sarah, reigniting her pain with a searing intensity that felt worse than the initial discovery. It was as if he had betrayed her all over again, shattering the fragile illusion of honesty they had painstakingly tried to build. The newly revealed truth, a name whispered in anger, struck Sarah with the force of a physical blow. Her trust, already a fractured mosaic, shattered irrevocably. It wasn't just the infidelity itself anymore, it was the deliberate withholding, the calculated deceit that had allowed her to believe they were truly working towards honesty. A cold, hard realization settled in her heart. She had been living a lie, not just from Mark, but from herself, clinging to a hope that had been built on quicksand. The final explosive confrontation erupted. Years of pent-up emotions, unspoken resentments, and raw pain finally breaking free. Their voices, once soft with endearments, now echoed with accusations, each word a shard of glass. In the wreckage of their argument, a stark clarity emerged. They were no longer two individuals striving for a shared future, but two wounded souls inflicting deeper cuts on each other with every desperate attempt to heal. Their individual paths to recovery, once seemingly intertwined, were now diverging sharply, leading them in opposite directions. The admission, though agonizing, was undeniable. They were hurting each other more by staying together, each interaction a painful reminder of what was lost and what could never be regained. The love that had once bound them so fiercely now felt like a suffocating weight. The conversation that followed was one of the most painful of their lives, steeped in a profound sadness that transcended anger. They acknowledged with heavy hearts that love alone was not enough to overcome the catastrophic damage. The foundation was gone, and no amount of scaffolding could rebuild it. The logistical challenges of separation began to unfold, a daunting task of dividing a life meticulously built together. Their beautiful home, once a symbol of their shared dreams, became a painful inventory of memories. Their possessions, each with its own story, were now cold, inanimate objects to be separated. Their shared history, once a source of comfort, became a bittersweet burden. In the immediate aftermath of the separation, Sarah experienced a bewildering mix of emotions. There was a fragile sense of relief, a lifting of the constant tension that had defined their last months together. But this was quickly overshadowed by profound sadness, a deep ache for the loss of a future she had so vividly imagined, and then the fear of the unknown, a vast, empty space stretching before her. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a quiet strength began to stir within her. This was her journey of self-discovery. She reconnected with her passions, the architectural designs that had once brought her so much joy, now serving as a therapeutic outlet. She found solace in solitude, learning to trust her own instincts, to be her own anchor. Meanwhile, Mark embarked on his own arduous journey of deep introspection. Stripped of the relationship that had, in some ways, defined him, he was forced to confront his demons head-on. The past trauma, the gnawing inadequacy, the desperate need for external validation, all the underlying issues that had led to his betrayal, were laid bare. He sought professional help, committing himself to a rigorous path of therapy, determined to understand and heal the fractured parts of himself. It was a lonely, arduous process, but one he knew was essential for any semblance of future peace. Years later, their paths crossed unexpectedly at a mutual friend's art exhibition. They exchanged a brief, cordial greeting, a ghost of their former intimacy hovering between them. In that fleeting moment, Sarah saw a changed Mark, a quiet maturity in his eyes that spoke of hard-won battles, and Mark in turn saw Sarah, vibrant and confident, radiating a quiet strength that was entirely her own. There was a bittersweet acceptance in their exchange, an understanding that some foundations, once shattered, simply cannot be fully restored. Sarah, now thriving in her career and surrounded by a renewed sense of purpose, embarked on a new chapter, not defined by what she had lost, but by what she had gained. She had learned profound lessons about resilience, about the importance of self-worth that no external validation could provide, and about the true meaning of forgiveness, not necessarily for the person who had wronged her, but for herself, releasing the burden of anger and pain. Her journey had been arduous, marked by immense sorrow, but she emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentically herself than ever before, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to heal and find hope, even after profound loss.